This is footage of a captured and fully contained dogman, recorded inside a secure facility while researchers analyzed its body, behavior, and biology in real time. For months, researchers documented how it moved, how it reacted to humans, and what it was actually designed to do. And what this footage revealed changed everything we thought we knew about dogman encounters. So before we continue, make sure you subscribe and let us know where you're watching from. Thanks. Look, I know how this sounds. I know what you're thinking right now. But I need you to hear me out, because what I'm about to tell you isn't some campfire story or internet hoax. This actually happened, and the implications are far stranger than any legend you've ever heard. I've spent the last year piecing together information from sources who were there, who saw the reports, who understand what was discovered. None of them can speak publicly. None of them will ever confirm this conversation happened. But they all agree on one thing. What was learned in that facility changed everything they thought they knew about what's possible, about what's real, and about what might be walking around in the forests while we go about our normal lives completely unaware. About 3 years ago, something was caught. Not killed, not photographed from a distance, but actually contained and studied in a controlled facility. The thing people have been calling a dogman for decades. And what the research team discovered during those months of observation didn't just confirm the creature exists. It revealed something so much more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. The whole thing started in the upper Midwest. There had been sightings in that area for years. The usual reports that never go anywhere. People seeing something in the woods that walked upright, but definitely wasn't human. Most folks dismissed it, like they always do. But then the patterns started getting weird. The sightings weren't random anymore. They were happening in the same locations, at the same times, following routes that made no sense for a wild animal. A retired wildlife biologist noticed it first. He'd been tracking local reports for years, more as a hobby than anything serious. But when he plotted everything on a map, he saw something that made him pick up the phone. The creature wasn't wandering. It was patrolling. The sightings formed a clear perimeter around a specific area of forest, and they repeated on a predictable schedule. This wasn't animal behavior. This was something else entirely. Someone with resources and connections decided to take it seriously. They assembled a team, set up monitoring equipment, and waited. And eventually, they got it. The containment happened fast once they figured out where it would be. Within 48 hours, the thing was secured in a facility that had been prepared months in advance. No press release, no announcement, just a quiet transfer to a location where serious work could begin. That's when everything people thought they knew about this creature fell apart. The first thing they noticed was the body structure. This wasn't some bear walking on its hind legs or a person in a suit. The proportions were wrong for any mammal they'd ever documented. The arms were too long, the joints bent at angles that shouldn't work, and the muscle distribution didn't match anything in nature. But here's what made everyone in that room go quiet. There were no imperfections, no asymmetries, no slight variations from one side to the other. Everything was exactly balanced, exactly proportional, perfect in a way that natural creatures simply aren't. One member of the team, someone who'd spent 30 years studying mammalian anatomy, later said it was like looking at a computer rendering that had been made flesh. Real animals have quirks, little irregularities that develop as they grow. Maybe one leg is slightly longer than the other. Maybe the skull isn't perfectly symmetrical. These tiny variations are normal, expected, proof of organic development. But the dogman had none of that. It was bilateral symmetry taken to an impossible extreme, like someone had designed it in modeling software and then somehow printed it into existence. When you look at any evolved animal, you see the history of its development written in its body. You see features that used to serve one purpose but now serve another. You see leftover structures from earlier stages of evolution. You see adaptations built on top of adaptations, like layers of renovations on an old house. But the dogman had none of that. Its skeleton looked like something drawn up in a blueprint and executed perfectly the first time. There were no vestigial features, no evolutionary dead ends, no trial and error. Just clean, efficient design. The team started documenting everything. They examined bone density, muscle fiber composition, organ placement, cellular structure. Every test came back with the same unsettling conclusion. This thing didn't evolve. It was made. The joints were reinforced, but only at specific stress points. Not throughout the whole body, like you'd see in an animal that evolved to handle physical strain, but precisely where mechanical stress would be highest. It was like someone had run engineering calculations and added support exactly where the math said it was needed. The muscle groups had redundancies built in, backup systems that would take over if the primary muscles failed. That's not how nature works. Nature doesn't plan for failure modes. It just kills off the individuals that can't handle the stress. The internal organs were positioned for stability and efficiency, not for developmental convenience. In natural creatures, organ placement is partly determined by how the embryo develops. You get structures in odd places because of how the body forms in the womb. But the dogman's organs were arranged like someone had optimized a machine for performance. The digestive system was compact and positioned low for balance. The heart and lungs were centered and protected. Everything was where it should be if you were designing from scratch, not where it would end up through natural development. Then they looked at the cellular level. In natural organisms, you see genetic drift. You see small mutations that accumulated over time, variations between cells, tiny imperfections that tell the story of an organism growing and living. But the dogman's cells were uniform, identical in a way that shouldn't be possible. It was like looking at manufactured parts, rolling off an assembly line, each one exactly like the last. There was no mutation drift, no variation, no signs that this thing had grown from a single cell through normal biological processes. Whatever this creature was, it hadn't been born. It had been constructed. This is where things get really interesting. Everyone assumed, based on the stories, that if the dogman was real, it would be some kind of apex predator. The reports always made it sound like a monster, something that hunted people. But when they actually observed it, that theory fell apart immediately. They examined its teeth, expecting to see the wear patterns of an active hunter, but the teeth were almost pristine. The wear that existed was minimal and inconsistent with regular hunting activity. The canines were sharp, sure, but they weren't being used to tear flesh on a regular basis. The molars showed almost no grinding wear at all. For comparison, a wolf's teeth at similar age would be noticeably worn down from constant use. This thing barely used its teeth. The digestive system was even more telling. It was efficient, extremely so, but it wasn't built for frequent feeding. The stomach was smaller than you'd expect for a creature that size, and the intestinal tract was optimized for maximum nutrient extraction, not volume processing. This was a system designed to get every possible calorie out of minimal food intake. A true predator needs to eat regularly, and their digestive systems reflect that. This thing could go long periods without eating, and its body was built to handle that. They monitored its behavior around feeding time. When food was provided, the creature ate slowly, methodically, and only what it needed. There was no food aggression, no excited anticipation, no instinctive hunting behavior. It approached eating like a chore, something necessary, but not central to its existence. And afterward, it could remain inactive for days without showing any signs of hunger or distress. They tested this extensively, varying feeding schedules and amounts. The dogman adjusted immediately, showing no signs of distress, even when meals were delayed by significant periods. A natural predator would show agitation, pacing, increased hunting behavior. But this thing just entered its low-power mode and waited. It was like watching a device switch to standby mode when not in active use. The biological efficiency was remarkable and deeply unnatural. The energy expenditure data was fascinating. When the dogman wasn't active, its metabolism dropped significantly. It could enter a state of deep rest where it barely moved, barely breathed, burning minimal calories. It could maintain this state for extended periods. That's not predator behavior. Predators are high-energy machines. They need fuel constantly. This thing was built to conserve energy, to remain dormant for long stretches, and then activate only when necessary. So if it wasn't hunting, what was it doing? The answer came from behavioral analysis. The team started mapping its movement patterns during the months before capture. They went back through all the documented sightings and reports, plotted them on maps, looked for correlations. And there it was. The dogman wasn't roaming randomly. It wasn't following game trails or water sources. It was patrolling boundaries. Every sighting occurred along the edges of defined areas. Natural corridors, property lines, transitional zones between different types of terrain. The creature would move along these boundaries in consistent patterns, like someone walking a perimeter fence. It would return to the same locations at regular intervals. It was territorial, but not in the way animals are territorial. It wasn't defending a hunting ground or a den. It was maintaining a border. In containment, this behavior continued. The facility was large enough to allow movement, and within days, the dogman had established patrol routes. It would walk the perimeter, checking the same points repeatedly, spending most of its time near access points, not trying to escape, just monitoring. It would position itself where it could observe entry and exit points, where it could watch corridors, where it had sight lines on anything that moved through the space. The precision of these patrols was striking. The creature would return to the exact same spots at nearly identical intervals, varying by only minutes across days of observation. It had established optimal observation points and maintained them with mechanical consistency. If you timed its rounds, you could predict where it would be at any given moment with remarkable accuracy. This wasn't learned behavior or instinct. This was programmed function. The really interesting part was what happened when people approached the boundaries of its patrol area. As long as someone stayed outside the zone it had defined, the dogman watched but didn't react aggressively. But the moment someone crossed into its territory, the creature's entire demeanor changed. Not into rage or hunting mode, but into alert deterrence. It would position itself between the intruder and the interior of its space, make itself visible, and hold position. The message was clear: turn back. If the person retreated, the dogman would immediately disengage. No pursuit, no continued aggression, just a return to patrol mode. It wasn't trying to kill anyone. It was trying to keep them out. This wasn't a monster. It was a security system. That realization changed the entire direction of the research. If the dogman was designed to control territory, to deter intrusion, then it had to be monitoring something specific. So they started testing its responses to different stimuli. Animals were introduced into the observation area at various times. Deer, rabbits, smaller predators like coyotes. The dogman barely acknowledged them. A glance, maybe, but no sustained interest. It would continue its patrol routes, stepping around the animals like they were furniture. Zero hunting instinct, zero prey drive. These weren't threats and they weren't food, so they didn't matter. But humans? The response was completely different. The moment a person entered its space, the dogman's attention locked on, not with aggression, but with intense focus. It would track their movement, note what they were carrying, observe their behavior patterns. If someone performed the same action multiple times, the creature would start anticipating it. It learned schedules within days. It recognized routines, understood patterns, predicted behavior. The team started varying their activities intentionally. Different people, different times, different tasks. The dogman adapted immediately. It paid particular attention to tools and equipment. When someone carried something new into the space, the creature's focus would intensify. It would watch closely, note how the object was used, track where it was stored. It was learning, constantly learning, specifically about human activity. What really got their attention was the way it processed information. The creature wasn't just watching. It was analyzing, categorizing, building a working model of human behavior in its space. When maintenance staff came through, the dogman would note their tools, their routine, the specific tasks they performed. The next time those same staff members appeared, it would already be positioned along their likely path, watching but not interfering. It had learned to distinguish between routine maintenance and unusual activity, responding differently to each. They tested its memory by having the same person enter wearing different clothing at different times. The dogman recognized them anyway, not by appearance, but by movement patterns, gait, behavior. It was reading humans at a level that suggested its entire cognitive system was optimized for this specific task. Not general intelligence, not problem solving, but human observation and analysis. One of the most striking observations came from a long-term monitoring session. A team member was working inside the space for several hours, performing routine tasks. The dogman watched for the first hour, then seemed to lose interest and returned to its patrol. But 3 days later, when the same person entered at the same time, the creature was already positioned along their expected route. It had remembered the schedule and anticipated the arrival. That's not reactive behavior. That's predictive analysis. The implications hit the team hard. This creature was designed to watch people, to learn their patterns, predict their movements, understand their routines. It was built to monitor human activity in a specific area and deter intrusion into that space. It was a biological security system, and it had been running for a very long time, which raised the obvious question: where did it come from? The genetic analysis provided some answers, but they weren't comforting ones. The dogman's DNA was unlike anything in the known biological record. It shared some base sequences with mammals, enough to suggest it was built using Earth biology as a foundation, but the overall structure was wrong. There were sequences that didn't match any known species, arrangements that suggested artificial insertion rather than natural development. The DNA analysis revealed something else troubling. The genetic code included what appeared to be error correction mechanisms, sequences that actively prevented mutation and genetic drift. In normal organisms, DNA accumulates small changes over time. It's inevitable, part of how evolution works. But the dogman's DNA was designed to maintain stability, to resist change, to remain exactly as it was created. This wasn't biology as we understand it. This was engineering taken to its logical extreme, creating a living system with the stability of manufactured hardware. More concerning was what the DNA didn't show. There was no genetic diversity, no variation that would indicate a population. In natural species, even individuals from the same family show genetic differences. But this creature's genetic code was clean, uniform, identical to itself in a way that only makes sense if it's a single created instance. There was no evidence of reproduction capability, no genetic markers for sexual characteristics beyond the basic male physiology. This thing couldn't breed, didn't breed, wasn't designed to breed. The biological aging indicators were strange too. The creature's cells showed signs of long-term function, but not normal aging. It was like something built to last, to operate over extended periods without degradation. The telomeres, the caps on chromosomes that shorten as cells divide, weren't shortening normally. They were maintained at a consistent length, suggesting some kind of built-in repair mechanism that prevented normal aging processes. Based on various biological markers, the estimates put the creature's operational time in decades. Possibly many decades. This wasn't a recent creation. It had been out there, performing its function, for a very long time. And here's the disturbing part. There was no evidence of ongoing maintenance or support. No signs that anyone was monitoring it, managing it, or even aware it was still active. It was just running, like a machine left on when everyone went home. The research team spent months analyzing every aspect of the creature's biology, trying to understand the sophistication of its design. And the more they learned, the more impressive and unsettling it became. This wasn't crude genetic manipulation. This was advanced bioengineering, the kind that required knowledge and capabilities far beyond current technology. The muscle tissue, for example, wasn't just strong. It was optimized at the molecular level for specific types of movement. Fast-twitch and slow-twitch fibers were distributed in exact ratios for the creature's patrol and deterrence functions. The nervous system showed enhancements that improved reaction time and sensory processing. The skeleton had composite structures, biological materials, reinforced in ways that shouldn't occur naturally, but provided exactly the strength needed without excess weight. Everything about the DOGMAN's construction suggested it was designed for a single purpose and built to fulfill that purpose indefinitely without external support. It could operate independently, survive on minimal resources, remain active for extended periods, and continue its function year after year. It was meant to be deployed and forgotten, a permanent solution to a specific problem. But what problem? What was it guarding? The sighting locations didn't correspond to anything obvious. No military installations, no government facilities, no restricted areas that anyone could identify. Just wilderness, remote forests, places people occasionally wandered through but didn't inhabit. The boundaries it patrolled didn't protect anything that modern authorities recognized as valuable or sensitive. The team cross-referenced the sighting maps with historical records, looking for anything that might explain why someone would place a biological security system in those specific locations. They found old property records, deeds from a century or more ago, references to land use that no longer existed, but nothing definitive, nothing that explained the pattern. One possibility that came up repeatedly in their discussions was that the DOGMAN wasn't guarding a physical location at all, but rather maintaining a buffer zone, keeping people away from something that was either no longer there or buried so deep that modern casual use of the land wouldn't disturb it. The creature's behavior would make sense if its function was simply to ensure human activity in those areas remained minimal and temporary. And it had been succeeding. For decades, people who encountered the DOGMAN turned back, spread stories that kept others away, maintained exactly the kind of avoidance the creature seemed designed to create. It wasn't killing people because it didn't need to. Fear and deterrence were enough. The system was working as intended. The final piece of the puzzle was the most troubling. The team tried to determine who might have created this thing. What organization had the capability and motivation to deploy biological security systems in remote wilderness areas? They found nothing. No records, no classified programs, no corporate or government initiatives that matched. Whoever made the DOGMAN had covered their tracks completely or simply didn't exist anymore. That led to a conclusion that nobody wanted to voice, but everyone was thinking. The technology required to create the DOGMAN, the biological engineering sophistication, the long-term stability of the design, all of it suggested origins that might not be recent, might not even be current. This could be a remnant of a program that ended years ago, or decades ago, or longer. Something deployed when different people with different priorities needed to protect something that may not even matter anymore. The creature sits in containment now, still performing its patrol routes in a space that has no territory to guard, still watching for humans, still tracking patterns, still maintaining a function that nobody commissioned and nobody can turn off, because the DOGMAN wasn't designed with a shutdown mechanism. It was designed to run indefinitely, and that's exactly what it's doing. The research continues, but the core findings are settled. The DOGMAN is not a cryptid, not an unknown species, not a legend that turned out to be real. It's a machine made of flesh, a biological system designed by someone with capabilities that shouldn't exist, deployed for reasons we can't determine, guarding boundaries that may not matter anymore. And here's what keeps me up at night. This is just the one they caught. the one they found. The sighting reports, even now, keep coming from different regions, different forests, different states, following similar patterns. Same behavior, same appearance, same boundary-focused movements. How many are there? How many biological security systems are still running in remote areas, still performing functions that nobody remembers, still guarding places that might not need guarding anymore? The dogmen they captured might be one of dozens or hundreds, all deployed by whoever had the capability and need for this kind of solution. And more troubling, what else is out there? If someone could create the dogman, if they had the biological engineering capability to build a creature specifically designed for territorial deterrence and human observation, what other problems did they solve with similar methods? What other biological systems are still running, still performing functions we don't understand, in places we haven't looked? Think about it. The dogman was designed for territorial control and observation. That's a specific function that solves a specific problem. But human needs are varied and complex. If this technology existed, if someone had the capability to design and deploy biological systems for targeted purposes, why would they stop at one application? Why wouldn't there be systems designed for other functions, other environments, other objectives? The research team started wondering about other cryptid reports, other strange sightings that had been dismissed or explained away. How many of those might be other engineered systems, each designed for its own specific purpose? The thought kept them up at night, because once you accept that one biological system was deliberately created and deployed, the possibility space becomes enormous and disturbing. The team published their findings in a restricted format, available only to specific agencies and research groups. The general public doesn't know. The official position is still that the dogman is folklore, misidentifications, overactive imaginations. And maybe that's better. Maybe people don't need to know that there are designed creatures in the woods, biological machines performing functions nobody can explain, built by people or organizations that might not exist anymore. But you know now. You know that the dogman is real, and that its existence proves something far stranger than just an unknown animal in the forest. It proves that someone, at some point, had the capability to create biological systems for specific purposes. It proves that those systems are still running, still functioning, still out there performing tasks that made sense to whoever deployed them. Sometimes I think about the people who created it. Who were they? What organization had the resources and knowledge to develop biological engineering at this level? Were they government, corporate, something else entirely? And why did they need a territorial control system in remote forests? What were they protecting or hiding that required a biological deterrent rather than conventional security? Those questions might never be answered. The paper trail, if it ever existed, is gone. The people involved are either silent or dead. The facilities where the dogmen might have been created are probably repurposed or demolished. Time erases everything, and whoever was responsible for this made sure they'd be erased too. All that remains is their creation, still running, still performing its function, decades after everyone forgot it existed. The next time you hear a story about something strange in the woods, something that doesn't quite make sense, something that seems too deliberately eerie to be natural, consider the possibility that you're not looking at an animal at all. You might be looking at a system, a solution to a problem you don't understand, still running long after everyone forgot it was there. The dogman is watching. It's always been watching. That's what it was made to do. And somewhere out there, in forests and wilderness areas you might pass through without a second thought, other systems are watching too, still performing their functions, still maintaining boundaries, still protecting whatever they were designed to protect. Whether those boundaries still matter is anyone's guess, but the systems don't know that. They were built to run indefinitely, and that's exactly what they're doing.